All right, today on Eclectic Handyman, we're going to be changing out what's called the Cross Axis Joints. It's these bushings right here on the rear knuckle on this 2001 Mustang COBRA with the independent rear suspension. There's one there, and there's one on the bottom. This is what they look like when they're old. This one has been removed from the other side. This one, the seal was broken. They were definitely in bad shape. And we ended up buying the ones from Tilt Boogie right here. So this will be pressed out of the knuckle once we remove it. And that's the main part that I want to highlight. As far as getting to it, I've already removed the brakes, and I have another video on removing the brakes. But essentially what we need to do is, I also had a video on removing the brake cable, but we will remove this castle nut right here and then use a pitman tool to pop off the tie rod, okay, properly. Then we will need to remove this top bolt and the bottom bolt. And per the instructions on the top bolt, and I'm lucky because probably the last person who did alignment has already marked this bolt in 2 positions. We need to put this back in the same position and line this up when we reassemble. The last piece is that drive shaft on the inside. We will need to pop it out. It's really pretty simple to pop out. And then this whole knuckle assembly will rest here on the floor, and we can begin to use the tool that came from Tilt Boogie, or at least in the kit that I bought, that will press these in and out. And that's what I want to demonstrate. So I'm going to go ahead and get those bolts removed and get the knuckle on the ground, and then I'm going to show you how this works. All right, so took out the cotter pin. Now it's time to take off this castle nut with a 20 millimeter socket. There we go. To use the pitman puller, we'll slide it down in, right in between, and get this to tighten down right in the middle of that nut. Or excuse me, the bolt, and then that'll push it through and safely release this, and you can see where it's pressing. So the action of pressing down safely will remove that tie rod in from the knuckle. Let me get it set up here. All right, so I had the pitman tool lined up. I've got it, the bolt pinched down right in the center in there. I removed one of the slides off of this, which, by the way, you do not need to remove this bracket in order to do this job. And so I have my 19 millimeter wrench here, and I'm just going to start tightening on it. And then eventually it's going to pop down. It'll just go pop. There we go. Just like I said, it'll pop down, and then that tie rod will be removed. All right, next up, don't forget, you got to mark it with a marker, the top bolt, and the bottom bolt does not need that. That just comes straight out. So let's go. And I'm also going to remove this shield. There's 2 10 millimeter bolts in here. This is really easy to remove, so let's go ahead and do that. I'll get that one, and there's one more down below. And you can spray these with a little PB blaster first, if needed, and get it in there. This one actually is a little dirtier, so I'll probably spray some brake cleaner in there. And there we go. All right, so both bolts are going to be 18 millimeter on both sides. So this time, instead of a ratcheting wrench, I'm going to use a fixed wrench just so I can hold it in place. And we'll go ahead and get my, you can use hand tools if you want, but I happen to have an air gun, so I'm going to go ahead and pop it out. All right, there's number 1, and it put my light away. We'll get that back down here. And then we're going to do the exact same thing here on the bottom. And just be ready, because as you saw, it did shift a little bit. Hold that in place. Got both my nuts out. And there we go. We can pull that bolt out, pull the top bolt, and there we have it. The last piece I'm going to do is I'm going to just pry that half shaft out at the inside with a pry bar. It's really easy. All right, so I'm under here, and it's a little challenging to see, but I'm using this pry bar right here for the drive shaft, and it's not going to be too difficult. I can get pretty good leverage and just give it a little pop. And there we go. And it's out. And we'll want to use great care removing this, not to scratch or hurt any of the seals. So we'll want to keep it centered as we pull it on through. All right. So now that I've got the half shaft removed, I just want to move the brake line out of the way. I've got both bolts out. I'm going to very carefully pull this back. Now, one thing I need to do is, remember we moved that brake line. So we'll come over here. If we come over here, this line can go through there. So I can push that through when needed. But right now, all right, let's go ahead and come back a little bit here so we can see. I'm going to very gently, as I mentioned, remove that without scratching. There we go. Okay, now I need to push that cable out. Just maybe gently rest this, making sure everything's okay. Pull that cable through. A little cumbersome to work with, not too bad. And then I'm going to gently rest it right here on the ground. What I'm taking note of is I don't want any of this to be compromised. Unfortunately, this is not wide enough here to actually pull it all the way through, but it's no problem because I can work right in here on the ground. And I can press the bushings out. This is resting right here. The drive shaft, there's nothing being compromised here. And on the inside, it's just resting right there. So this is how I'm doing it. Because again, there's not enough clearance right there without taking this off to pull the whole thing out. So we can go ahead and get started. Okay, for the first step, what we need to do is remove this retaining clip around the cross axis joint bushing. And there are no eye hooks on here. So you're going to need to use a pair of snap ring pliers. Now, I'm going to tell you, I already had to pause my working because I had one of these cheap small pairs from Harbor Freight, and they are absolutely weak. Not only do they not work well for this, they're definitely not going to work well when we have to get to the main bushing to take off the heavy duty ring. And it recommends for the full tilt boogie ones to have a medium duty. So we definitely need a decent pair of snap ring pliers here. So the easiest way to do this is to use the snap ring and then a hook. Because once I get it disengaged just a little bit, and it's a little tricky, it might take a few times, you can get under it with the hook. And try it again. Oh, there we go. And it's coming off. There we go. That's the step one. Okay, so now that we've got the clip off, we need to go ahead and use the tool and two 11/16" wrench. One of the things that we'll also need is a tube of like anti-seize or never seize, because we need to lubricate certain components, but namely the threads on this long bolt, so that as we apply pressure, we can back them back off. So I've gone ahead and you can see I've just put some on the threads here. And the way we'll do this is there's a flange side, which is the side that faces the front of the car. And then there was the clip side. And the way it works is we push from where the clip was this direction, and then it receives in the cup by twisting the two. So let me go ahead and get that put on there. Okay, so we just thread it through. And we want to make sure we get good contact. If my seals are busted, it recommends putting a little bit of lube on there if needed, but it fits on real nicely. And then you can see on the other side, it's supported. And tightening this up. And we'll assure alignment right at the end here. Want to make sure it's in the proper place, has good support. That looks nice. Excellent. And you'll want to note how much thread you have on each side, because as I turn one side and it starts to back out, there may not be enough. So I'm actually going to give it a little bit more room and readjust as needed. And it's no problem once you start. If you need to back it off so you can adjust it, you'll be able to do that too. All right, got good alignment. Make sure you do not do this in the incorrect way. I am pushing the bushing through into the receiving cup on this side. Just going to go ahead, and once it gets, it's a little bit challenging to get it started, but once we do, it's not that bad. So I'm going to use a fixed wrench on the receiving side, and then we'll go ahead and begin to tighten. I'm just going to support this with my feet. And there it's starting. There we go. We're pushing it on through. And once we get it kind of unseated from that knuckle, you see how it's getting easier? That's right. Just keep on turning, and it'll help with that never seize on the threads. What's going to happen is this is going to push it all the way in. It's getting much easier with each turn. Again, just a little difficult to get it started. Probably more from the position that I'm in because I'm sitting. And now it's really bingo. All right, so let's take a look. And just release the bolts. Unscrew them. And there we have it. Check this out. There is our really old cross axis joint. We can see right here, what we need to do is use a little steel wool to clean this up. And then when we get ready to press in the new one, we'll lubricate the leading edge with some never seize as the direction indicate. We'll press this back in, go to the other side, and we'll be done. All right, so I've got some steel wool here, and we need to clean up the eye. And this works really well. Check this out. As you can see, look at that, bringing that dirt right off. And you could spend a bit of time, and you could use a wire brush if you wanted, but just check that out. It does work quite effectively. So we want to get the inside here. We want to get it all cleaned up, and both sides of the eye opening here to just getting the other side, and it's pretty much the same. I happen to have some brake cleaner to get the dust off, so I'll probably do a little spray of that too. Get the outside, and then we'll begin to go ahead and press it in. All right, so this is the new cross axis joint from Full Tilt Boogie, and one of the things we notice on here is it does have a heavy duty snap ring. And again, I was not able to even remove this from the new one without a pair of a little heavier duty snap ring pliers. When you remove this, I recommend you remove outward, not to score this, because this is definitely, it is a bit heavy duty, which is nice. It's going to take a few times to get that off. And as you can see, slipping a little bit. Let's see. this point. There we go. I was able to pull it off. All right, so I've gone ahead and put some never sees on the leading edge, and also I did put some on the leading edge of the hole right here. And so what we'll need to do is we can just kind of, well, first of all, I'm just going to spread it a little bit. I don't want it to get too goopy on there, just enough so it can push through nice and easy. Same with the eye hole, and then we can clean that up and kind of coat that hole with the never sees as well. All right. Now, what we'll need to remember is that we have to put it back in the exact same way. The flange faces toward the front of the car, and the clip side that we removed goes on the back side. So this is going to be the opposite. We're just going to be pressing it in. The other thing is now we'll use the small end of the receiving cup to push it through, the small end of the cup to push it through, and the large end to receive it. So we'll push this through. We've already got it seated just by hand. And then the way this works is we'll be pushing with the small cup in to the receiving cup, and we'll get this all lined up. All right. Once again, make sure that you have some anti-seize on these bolts so that they spin freely. And we'll go ahead and you put the washer on. And we're going to want to have a really good seat all the way around. We want to make sure that this is even, the small cup, not lopsided. We're going to make sure that this is really lined up well. We're going to take our time and do that step right. Go ahead and get our 11/16" wrench on here again. Hold the back one in place. And begin to tighten and press. Nice and easy. And with that never sees on it, helps lubricate and gets that bushing going. And as you can see, if you come up top here, you can see it starting to come in. So let's go ahead and continue on. And what we're looking for is for this flange to seat against the knuckle. I gotta hand it to them. This tool really works well. The one that comes with the kit. The other option would be if you had a press, an actual press. Then you'd have to take the knuckle completely off the car, take it over to the press, and you could press the bushings in. But for the average handyman, such as myself, this works extremely well. And it does take a little bit of, a little bit of force here. That's not bad. Pretty heavy duty. Almost there. And there you have it. It's fully seated, nice and flush. We'll go ahead and loosen those bolts back now. And again, it's important to have that never seize because you are putting some pressure on these bolts. And we'll clean up the access here in a second. Look at that. Looks great. Way nicer than that old one that we had on there. Get the extra clean off. And a little bit of it actually will help slide that new heavy duty, kind of medium duty O-ring on, or the snap ring, excuse me, which we have right here. All right, so I need to take it's actually easier to put this on than to take it off when it comes new. So let me slide over here a little bit. Get my O-ring on it. Probably want to wear eye protection just to make sure. Bingo. Okay, and so just to make sure that we're in the groove, we'll just go ahead and put them back in and make sure it slides. You see how I'm sliding it? That indicates we've got good contact, and that's all the way on there. That's excellent. I'm just going to keep it right at the top. I'll clean it up. Of course, I got a dirty rag, so I keep wiping it right back on there, but I'll get a new rag and clean this up, and this is looking really, really sharp. And so, there you have it. There is a brand new full tilt boogie, and there's other companies that make them as well, but this one just seems to work extremely well. Cross axis bushing installed. That is a much improvement over the old eroded broken one here. And I noticed this when I was doing a brake job, and I decided to continue on since I had half the work done, just to go ahead and press these out. Now, the last step is we have to do the bottom one. The procedure is going to be identical. The only thing you need to remember is that when we turn this over, we're going to be opposite, but they get installed the same. The flange always faces towards the front of the car, and the clip always faces the rear. If you get confused, here's a little indication. This caliper bracket faces the rear of the car. So the clips are always going to be facing the caliper bracket. And I'm just going to show you, how do we get to the bottom one? Simply lift up gently, spin it. Whoops, not that much. Rest it back down, nice and gentle. Now we can go ahead and service the second one. So, as I mentioned, now the clip, the original clip, getting focused there, is going to be on this side, and the flange on this side. So we'll push this one out, and then we'll push the new one in and put the new clip. It's the same process. And then we'll reassemble everything. And the second bushing, just like this, we'll be pushing from the back side in, having the clip, again, same side with the caliper bracket, just like the first one that we completed. All right, so that's it for replacing the bushings. When I reassemble this, I'll go ahead and leave the torque specifications for the bolts that went through the knuckle, as well as the castle nut. And the one thing I'm going to do, you got to be really careful when putting this back in. Hold it steady. Make sure that you don't rip this inner seal back there. And that seal back there, I'm going to clean it, lube it with a little bit of bearing grease, as well as the end of the seal on this side. There's lots of videos on drive shafts. You can check it out. But it just, you might have to rotate a little bit. Once you put it in, you might have to rotate it and it'll just pop back in. And then we'll reassemble, make sure we put the brake line back through this hole right here. We'll reassemble everything. This, you don't need the Pitman tool. We'll just put it back up through, put the castle nut. I recommend a new cotter pen. They're very cheap, and we'll be all done. And the completed product. Still put a cotter pin in here. Cleaned it up a bit. And don't forget, realign these marks when torquing this bolt down. Much improved. So that's it from the Eclectic Handyman on how to replace the cross axis joints on this independent rear steering IRS on this 2001 Mustang COBRA.